Well, welcome everybody to this plenary session. I'm Bill Cope, I'm from the University of Illinois, and this is Mary Kalantzis, who's also at the University of Illinois. It's my great pleasure to introduce Pierpaolo Limone, who is the rector of the University of Foggia. Now, Pierpaolo is a particularly important person in Italian education because his interests are around media, and one of the ironies of this moment is all of a sudden we are using media as the way to connect with everybody in universities and in the world. But also, you know, the Italian experience is of great interest to all of us at the moment because I think we could probably say after China, it was the first European country or Western country to have to deal with this COVID crisis on a very large scale, and you know, they're a fair bit down the track. So what we're going to do is, this is going to be an informal kind of conversation session, and I'm going to hand over to Mary, who's going to ask the first question and start the conversation.
Hello, Pierpaolo. This is our e-learning and innovation pedagogies conference, Inroads, and we're going to be participating virtually. So,
except we're only virtually in Rhodes.
We are in Champaign.
In Foggia, and we're in Champaign, Illinois.
But you know, it's prescient. You know, the issues of the conference, when you know the subtitle was "There is no scale, distance and access in the era of distributed learning." Now, you as a scholar and as a professor, and before your position as rector, as a head of a unit, as we were, have been exploring these issues. You know, what does e-learning offer us? What are the affordances? You know. And distance now has taken on such a different meaning than when we were talking about it before. So the first question is, you've transitioned from being a professor and a thought leader and a researcher and scholar to being an administrator. So how in the university where you are in Foggia, are these issues unfolding now, given that there's no choice anymore about distance learning, or there hasn't been, at least until this point?
Well, thank you for having me here. Yes, actually, there is a very, I would say, surreal situation, because we are a traditional university, a campus-based university, and suddenly in very few days, less than 1 week, we had to organize a transition from analogic to digital into entering this new mode of learning and teaching. And 100% of our courses now are offered online. And of course, we had different reactions from teachers, from scholars, from professors, and from students. I think most of them are understanding the situation, and some of them are actually looking into the future, understanding, trying to figure how to use these tools, these chances of distance education, the affordances, as you were saying, of the new technologies into the everyday learning and teaching practice. But still is an ongoing process. We have been using distance teaching for a long while in small courses at the universities, like masters or postgraduate courses, limited number of people. Now we have this sudden transition to an important number, 11,000 students online, and 500 professors are in this moment using the platform. So of course it's a shocking transformation.
So I'm going to ask you a question about pedagogy, but I'll just share this for the audience. Our university at Illinois is a residential university like yours, a research one, and 100% of our courses are now also delivered online, right? Just this sudden change. But I'm going to ask you, because the conference is about innovative pedagogies, what do you think is happening around that question of pedagogies? In this instant transition, are we duplicating what we did already? Are we going back to the past? you know, what are the opportunities for pedagogy in this moment? And I know as an administrator, you might not be on the ground where the teachers are, but what are your views about the potential for different pedagogical engagement as a consequence of the affordances of the digital, which you've been writing about forever?
Well, I see opportunities, of course, but I'm also worried about rejection of these new technologies, because most of the educators, most of the professors that are using the technologies are just transferring their everyday teaching practices in, you know, in physical space into the digital space without any new design for the affordances of the digital space. So for most of them, it's a new experience. They're curious about the new technologies, but they are just using the unlimited amount of the possibilities of the tools that they are using. And of course, I'm afraid of a kind of rejection after this initial period of curiosity, because they are starting to miss the embodiment, the presence, the physical experience, because we don't have enough training, enough knowledge on how to use these tools in the most effective way.
Right. That last point is the most important point, of course, because the potential for a more human engagement is available to us through, you know, the social media sort of strategies, through peer-to-peer engagement, through, you know, it is possible. But when you're rushing to put your notes and your textbooks online and then just asking students to respond as always, I think the students themselves must find it a bit perplexing. Have you had any feedback from students about how they're experiencing this sudden transition?
You're right. Also, we have, I mean, mostly, as I say, we have positive feedbacks now, because it's a new experience, and they are, both the components, students and professors, they are happy that we were able to find a rapid solution to this educational crisis that is going along with the, you know, health crisis. But you're right, and the issue is that since there is not enough, I mean, knowledge. I mean, the people don't know, professors don't know the grammar of the e-learning tools that they're using. This could be discomforting. I don't know if this is the right word in English, but this could cause disaffection to the technology. And for this reason, we are actually investing now, after the emergency of, you know, the transition, in training offering training to the professors, and also we are creating this coaching of expert professors that already had experience with the new technology, that are leading small groups of other professors that want to explore and innovate with these languages in order to understand the possibilities of the technology itself and the methodology.
Right. That's good to know. So if I can put you back, give you your old hat in your old lab, what kind of strategies were you experimenting with? What kinds of ways were you trying to expand the ways in which we engaged? The kind of research you were doing, the kind of tools that you're inventing that would allow us to create pedagogical designs for learning in really human ecologies, you know, ecologies that we're engaging, and perhaps even superior even than some place, the traditional, you know, lecture person at the front speaking.
Yes, we already, I mean, the tools are already there. We need to overcome the behavioristic approach of the Moodle platform, of the traditional e-learning platform, and using tools that enable the collaboration and the peer learning among students, and change the role of the professor from, you know, someone who is delivering a content to someone that is engaging, helping to engage students in a discussion and in productive activities. We already do this, but we do this on small numbers and with students and professors that know how to do it. The issue is now taking the chance to expand that to a larger base, to a larger population of professors and students, and being able to track this process while it's going. That, from the point of view of a researcher, is extremely interesting because it's a very large experiment of transition from one pedagogy to another, from one technology of speech and word to a technology of mediated speech and word through technology.
Right. The scale issue is a very important one because immediately we had to go to scale, like unusual levels of scaling up what we were doing. And the tracking issue, I've heard a number of people now talking about how do we track what we do? How do we, do we just give the quiz or the test at the end? And of course, the opportunities for tracking are there in the online environment. But as you say, the heritage platforms, the Moodles and the Canvases and those heritage platforms were never meant for the core business of that human interaction. They were set up originally for very different purposes. We've added patches to them now, but they don't quite fit the bill for the aspirations that we might have. And that's why I think what your university was doing and what you were doing yourself with your teams in trying to invent new tools as well as new processes was so critically important. And as the rector of the university, as the leader, because I think leadership in a university really matters. If it's just down to the individual researcher and the individual unit, progress happens, but it can't be generalized. So the role of the leader is so critical, and given the multiple roles you have had and have, I was just wondering how possible you think it is from the administrator of your university to create the conditions for these new tools and to harness them, and what kind of resources are needed, and what new organizations are required, or maybe what new business models even might be needed, more flexible business models if we move in this direction positively.
Well,
there's a lot in that, Papa.
Yeah, many questions in one, actually. But yeah, starting from the business model, I have to say that we are realizing now that this emergency gave us the opportunity to engage with an audience that we were not targeting as our primary audience as a university. I'm referring to people that work and want to combine the work and studying experience, for example. And those people are getting more and more interested in enrolling in university, which is a very strange phenomenon. I mean, because people are locked down. I mean, people are isolated in their home, and they ask information about our degree courses just to, engage in something while they are, at home. Or also, actually, because unfortunately, some of them risk to lose their job and want to reskill. They want new qualification in order to get ready for what will be the economy after the emergency. So on one side, I mean, we have to rethink our business model in terms of opening up to new students that were not actually in our plans originally. Because basically we refer to students that are 18, 19 years old. I mean, just coming out from the high school and doing, campus-based education. On the another aspect that I think is relevant is that some of the professors I'm talking about, I'm discussing with, they come to our office asking for investment in their course, in their technology, for example, teaching assistants, because they realized that what they were doing in the traditional practice was not enough. I mean, this is the chance for them to realize that the traditional offering of the lecture was not enough, and it's an opening up new opportunities to engage in innovation in teaching practice. And of course, we're very happy to offer them all the solutions that they ask. Also, I mean, we are a state institution, so mostly of our budget is coming from the state. And I have to say that luckily we have now a Minister of Education in Italy that is very much investing, is taking care of the universities. He was a former rector, he was the rector of the University of Naples, so he knows very well what is needed in this university system. So immediately the state has invested a lot of money to keep the universities updated with the new technologies and offer courses to students, so investing in them in new technicians, in new softwares. So we have the resources to offer what our professors want in order to give them the chances to operate in the best way. So in terms of leadership, I guess it would be important to read the opportunities in this crisis and offer our community of professors and researchers the tools that they need in order to rethink the education, the teaching model.
You are lucky.
So I've got a couple of questions now about the future. So one is, what's the immediate future? So in other words, that you will be having students coming back to the campus sometime soonish. So you're probably a bit ahead of us in the United States and some other countries in terms of this process. And the second question, which is, what do you think, looking back at this in a few years time, what do you think the legacy may be optimistically? So this is the sort of looking forward questions.
Well, we are closing what was called, at least in Italy, phase 1, so the phase of the lockdown. So we're going to reopen the universities slowly, and the schools actually as well, in what is called phase 2. Then we have phase 3. The phase 2 is the phase in which we open the labs at least, and postgraduate education with small numbers. So the idea is that we reopen the universities, we stop most of the smart working for our administrative staff, and reopen the labs. And we offer the chances to PhD students, postgraduate students, to go in the labs with the appropriate social distancing measures, of course. Then in September, when we will start we start traditionally the first semester of the year. We are planning to offer the entire semester from September to January in a blended mode in Italy, not just here, everywhere. So we will offer this blending mode in order to reduce the number of people entering in the classrooms, differentiating, for example, for large number of students in courses with large number of students and courses with small numbers, and of course offering diverse and specific modes of teaching in the different situation in order to reduce the contact. Basically, this is what we are going to do in phase 3 from September. From January, I think we will have to start to think, as I mentioned, how we will take advantage of the experience of this digital or half digital blended experience that we have experienced everywhere in Italy. I mean, I've read somewhere that we have 1.5 billion students all over the world that are using digital technology in this moment. And in Italy, we have 1.8 million university students now using distance teaching. So this is a huge experience, and we have to take some, to learn something from this lesson.
Very important. All right. Well, look, thank you.
One more question, though.
Okay.
Your administrators have come back, but also this way of working. I mean, how do you think it'll affect the digital domain? Because we've all been working from home, including secretaries and, other administrators. Are there opportunities there for different ways of? I mean, we invest so much in buildings and infrastructure. What kind of other infrastructure might we need for a more flexible way of working?
Yes. Even though I think this is This question is culturally biased because the situation in the States is very different from the one in Italy. I mean, we of course invested, yeah, we of course invested a lot in. Okay, sorry.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't have the disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope she's fine. Anyway, I was saying that we have a different approach to physical buildings than what you have in the States. Of course, we do have a large investment in the physical buildings, but is much less relevant part of our budget, our investment generally than the other costs, since most of the buildings we are coming from a long tradition of the university or are funded directly by the state or the regional government. So it's very different. I don't know. The issue I think is that anyway the university system in Italy has underestimated the impact of the digital teaching, since we delegated online education to a group of limited private institutions that are offering online education. So the campus-based, the conventional, the traditional university have invested a very limited amount of money and resources and research on online university. Now, in these days, everything is changing because this is becoming a main issue, of course. We are investing a lot of resources and there is a lot of curiosity. What is surprising me is that we have professors of biology or chemistry or physics that are coming to us, not just educationalists. They're coming to us asking for support to innovate. And of course, it is really changing the landscape. And in terms of budgeting and the future of what we are going to do, I think that the numbers on the digital infrastructure will grow a lot. And as you mentioned, I think the numbers in physical space will go down, but also because, as I mentioned, we will change the base of the students that are asking to be enrolled in the university, because we are targeting a new groups of students.
So we're heading towards a kind of a mixed business model, you know, with different price points potentially in the future, and our students being diversified in different locations, and probably our workforce. So the potential is quite large for how we go forward, because the cost of education, whether it's publicly funded or parents or students are paying for themselves, has really skyrocketed. And that's an issue that undoubtedly we'll all have to address.
Well, no, we have to address that in the US, but in Italy, it's publicly funded.
Yes, but I mean,
the real problem is the cost of
the
cost of public resourcing of education. Now, I mean, you're talking about a much larger demographic coming to the university potentially, people who need to retrain for new kinds of jobs, people who wouldn't normally have been there. So if that grows, there's a resourcing question as well. So in the US, it's a fee question, but in Italy, it's a resourcing question.
And finally, there is a place for face-to-face. There is important that we congregate, that we meet, that we conference. And perhaps the universities and the school spaces will be reconfigured to imagine how you do that productively, because sitting in a lecture theatre with 300 people listening silently to one professor, there's nothing social about that, right? So
except the viruses you can get from the person sitting beside you.
So I think,
well, if I can add something on that, maybe it's also a matter of representation of what is the identity of the universities itself as an institution and the identity of the professor. We still have this idea of the German 19th century institution that is an elite institution for very few people. Now we are in a totally different situation with mass education to university, and our goal actually is to extend that to the largest number possible in order to offer a higher education to everyone. So if we want to do that, I mean, the traditional system of the campus-based elite university that is coming from that old 200 years ago German model is not anymore the solution. We need to imagine a new idea of university that has to be hybrid, mixed. I don't know how to define that, but of course we have to include the idea of having seminars, laboratories, physical experience, but also much more rich and integrated digital experience.
Well,
and that has to be designed.
Yeah, well, look, that's a great way to end the conversation.
Thank you. Wonderful conversation. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
And it's been a
Thank you.
very insightful leader and scholar. Thank you.